American philosopher William James published his idea of non-military national service in the United States in his 1910 essay entitled The Moral Equivalent of War. In his words, the only thing needed is to inflame the civic temper as past history has inflamed the military temper. In 1929, the Great Depression hit. Millions of people lost their jobs and many farmers and businesses entered bankruptcy. Many struggled and barely got by. Unemployment reached 30% and soup kitchens were ubiquitous. One of the first elected leaders to use James's concepts to create public policy was Franklin Delano Roosevelt. It is believed that Roosevelt became interested in the ideas expressed in The Moral Equivalent of War as a student of William James at Harvard. As governor of New York, Roosevelt recruited more than 10,000 men from the state's unemployment rolls into reforestation projects. His service program was successful and paved the way for future government-sponsored service projects. As president, Roosevelt launched a number of new programs as part of the New Deal, including the Works Progress Administration, the Social Security Agency, and the Tennessee Valley Authority. He created the Civilian Conservation Corps, a precursor to today's NCCC, within months of his inauguration in 1933. This alphabet soup of programs had a tremendous impact and was very popular at the time. On June 22, 1944, President Roosevelt signed the Servicemen's Readjustment Act of 1944 into law. This bill became known as the GI Bill, and it provided a range of benefits for World War II veterans, including money for tuition and expenses related to education. Following World War II, with the U.S. slipping deeper into the Cold War, President John F. Kennedy focused the nation's attention on national service and challenged Americans.
And so, my fellow Americans, ask not what your country can do for you, ask what you can do for your country.
In 1961, President Kennedy established the Peace Corps, with authorizing legislation approved by Congress on September 22, 1961. President Kennedy said, "The wisdom of this idea is that someday we'll bring it home to America." The Peace Corps opened up opportunities for young Americans to volunteer their service in Africa, Asia, and Latin America. Kennedy envisioned the Peace Corps as an agency that enabled Americans to serve others in developing countries, to engage in cultural exchange, and to better themselves in the process. This was the beginning of what we now know as stipend volunteer service. As part of the War on Poverty, President Lyndon B. Johnson created a number of initiatives which engaged the energies and passions of Americans to develop opportunities for self-improvement. President Johnson created VISTA, Volunteers in Service to America, National Teacher Corps, Job Corps, and University Year of Action as part of the Domestic Volunteer Act of 1964. The VISTA program provides opportunities for Americans to serve full-time to help thousands of low-income communities and is sometimes called the Domestic Peace Corps. This program is now part of AmeriCorps. In the late 1960s, the Retired and Senior Volunteer Program, RSVP, the Foster Grandparent Program, and the Senior Companion Program, which today comprise National Senior Service Corps, were developed to engage older Americans in the work of improving the nation. These programs foster the understanding that older adults are valuable resources to their communities. In the mid-1970s, the Youth Conservation Corps, a direct descendant of FDR's Civilian Conservation Corps, engaged 32,000 people aged 14 to 18 in summer environmental programs. Later, an even larger federal program, the Young Adult Conservation Corps, was launched, providing young people with year-round conservation-related employment and education opportunities. In 1976, California Governor Jerry Brown established the California Conservation Corps, the first non-federal youth corps at the state level. 1988 Republican presidential candidate George H.W. Bush brought focus to national service when he announced plans for his Youth Engaged in Service program. At his inauguration, President Bush invoked the vision of 1,000 points of light and challenged people to take action through service to their fellow citizens. President Bush created the Office of National Service in the White House and merged the Center for Volunteerism and the Points of Light Foundation to foster volunteering. Congress passed and President Bush signed the National and Community Service Act of 1990. The legislation authorized grants to schools to support service learning and demonstration grants for national service programs to Youth Corps, nonprofits, and colleges and universities. These were Serve America. During his presidential campaign, Governor Bill Clinton visited a number of college campuses and urban communities and was intrigued by the national service movement. The time was right to rekindle the idealism called forth by John F. Kennedy in the Peace Corps and by Franklin D. Roosevelt in the Civilian Conservation Corps. Clinton unveiled his plan, describing it to Americans as a domestic GI Bill that would ask young Americans to go to the streets of our cities and be teachers, to be policemen where we need community policemen, to be nurses where there is a nursing shortage, to be family service workers where families are breaking down and children are abused and neglected, to rebuild America from the people point of view. We can do this with a national service. President Clinton signed the National and Community Service Trust Act of 1993, creating AmeriCorps and the Corporation for National and Community Service. The act expanded opportunities for Americans to serve their communities and required that states form commissions to access AmeriCorps funding. The Corporation for National and Community Service is a public-private entity that grants federal funds to state commissions and directly to service and education agencies to support service-related activities. The corporation oversees AmeriCorps and the National Senior Service Corps.